Fellow Nigerians, the International Center for Tax Research and Development brought about the program on the Constitution to assist both government and the people. It is important for us to know the way forward. We cannot continue to rely on old system. I would like to point out an important area, and that is the election 2019. The Constitution has provided enough processes for us to be able to elect those that we want. Please, there must be no war in Nigeria. We cannot afford to have any war in Nigeria. The taxes that we pay, the resources that government collect on our behalf must not be wasted on unnecessary frictions, must not be wasted on disputes, must not be wasted on war. Please, we should know that politicians, they love themselves. They will not do any evil against themselves after election. They will always come together. So therefore, my dear fellow countrymen and women and our youths, don't kill for anybody. Don't use any hate word because of anybody. It is your right to elect whoever you want. Do not allow anybody to intimidate you. It is your money that the government is using for this election. Don't destroy government property, because when you destroy government property, we will still be the one to pay for this property. I need to say this because election has always brought a lot of problems to us in this country, and we don't want that. Let us be free to go and elect whoever we want, and we should not sabotage any plans by INEC. We should not favor anybody to the extent of destroying our properties. Thank you so much for listening. I don't think Nigerians should be surprised with various violations by President Buhari. I don't think we should be surprised, because when he assumed office, he wanted the legislators to give him approval to have special rules, special orders. He wanted special orders so that he can rapidly carry out his job. But unfortunately, Nigerians cried aloud, say no, follow the Constitution. The legislators also say follow the Constitution. What I have seen in the attitude of the federal government is that we are beginning to issue decrees in a democratic setting, which is not tolerable, which is not acceptable, and we really have to guide against it. The issue of Executive Order 7, which our SAN has thoroughly trashed, I just want to add that in a system where there is constitutional provision, you see, taxation is legislative power. The executive is just carrying out the law. There is a difference between making a law and executing the law. The position of federal government is to execute law, not to make law. And an executive order cannot be turned into law. It's never done. Now, this issue of Executive Order 7, I have it here, Looking at it, I've gone through it, you find that we don't have the foundation to actually implement this executive Order 7 is not in consonance with what we are being made to believe. You see, when the military were going, they made decrees, and they said that those decrees must become Nigerian law. He is giving the president the power that in case there's any decree that they have made and it is not in conformity with the Constitution, he has the power to make it to conform with the Constitution. The military did not ask the president to change the Constitution. The president does not have that power to change the Constitution. But if there is any existing law that will be used after the military has gone and is not in conformity with the Constitution, that is what the Constitution is giving the president the power to ensure that it is in conformity with that with the Constitution, not making a different law entirely.
No love is all we need.
In the signing into law of the Executive Order 007 on the Road Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Scheme, Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari said, "This is another opportunity to demonstrate the commitment of this administration to conceive, design, develop, and deliver public-private partnerships with notable investors so as to close the road infrastructure gap in the transportation sector." Adding that in recent years, our reliance on annual budgetary allocations to fund roads development has been disappointing, given that our budget proposals have not always been passed in an expeditious manner by the National Assembly, stating that there have also been revenue shortfalls that have hampered our efforts to fully fund critical projects. Furthermore, at the inception of this administration, we met a significant backlog of local contractors' debt, which we, as a responsible administration, have undertaken to clear, emphasizing that we did so with a view to improving the confidence of construction firms in the federal government and to confirm our ability to honor financial commitments for infrastructure projects as and when due. Mr. President went further to state that his administration remains committed to keeping our promises to deliver qualitative roads and transportation infrastructure to our citizens, communities and businesses. Hence, we have consistently adopted innovative solutions to complement the annual budgetary spending on infrastructure. Having on Sunday 25th February 2018 approved the establishment of a Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund through which the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority is investing in critical roads and power projects nationwide, the Second Niger Bridge, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, East-West Road, Abuja-Kano Road, the Mambila Hydroelectric Power Project, to mention but a few of the numerous ongoing road projects and others across the country. According to Mr. President, this innovative funding mechanism, we have been able to address the challenges of project funding, cost variation, and completion risk that have plagued the development of the nation's critical roads infrastructure assets. Given these reasons, explanations, and account of the background necessitating the necessity of the Executive Order 007, President Muhammadu Buhari on Friday, 25th January 2019, signed the Executive Order 007 of 2019 with focus on road infrastructure development and refurbishment investment tax credit scheme on 19 critical roads across 11 states of the Federation. From available information, Nigeria ranks 11th on the list of countries with the world's worst road quality and network, according to the Global Competitive Index of 2018. According to other verifiable reports, the federal government had over time been lamenting on its inability to invest in critical infrastructure due to the paucity of funds. while other sources of funds raised by the Debt Management Office through SUKOK, the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, through the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Dividend Account, the federal budget, as well as counterpart funds from China Exim, China Development Banks and other development partners have been fully deployed to address 25 critical economic road projects across each of the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. With all these to bring to bear the emergence of the Executive Order 007, it is expected that the order will open up opportunities for investors to finance infrastructure development with regards to roads infrastructure with tax credit incentives, while to some, the Executive Order 007 will to them deepen private sector participation, quoting reports from The Economist. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Finance, on her part, sees the Executive Order 007 as signed by Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari as a veritable platform for private sector financing of infrastructure in Nigeria. Her perspective is in the view that the new Executive Order 007 will allow private companies such as the Dangote Group, Lafarge Africa PLC, Unilever Nigeria PLC, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Limited, China Road and Bridge Corporation Nigeria Limited, making the 6 private sector big players in the construction industry to execute the pilot phase of the scheme in the construction of major roads across the country and be paid in form of tax credit. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Finance, further stated that the Executive Order 007 of 2019 on the Road Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Scheme will provide the much-needed private capital for infrastructure development in the country, noting that the scheme will also incentivize private sector investment in Nigerian roads across key economic corridors and industrial clusters that will help relieve the government of the burden of funding the initial outlays for investments. This is aside the relevant provision of the Companies Income Tax Act that empowers the President to authorize the exemption from corporate taxation for certain companies or groups of companies by way of the issuance of tax credit. The scheme by its provision is also based on the demand for road projects by companies and other corporate sponsors who are willing to deploy their own working capital and financial resources to fund road projects located in the major economic corridors in the country where they have significant businesses and operations. Aside this, the Executive Order also provides mechanisms for groups of investors to pool funds together to invest in road projects directly or jointly through special purpose vehicles or in collaboration with institutional investors such as pension fund administrators, collective investment scheme, insurance companies, and investment banks. These measures have been adopted to enhance the ease of accessibility to the scheme's benefits by prospective investors. In terms of process and governance, prospective road projects are to be submitted to the government through the Schemes Management Committee headed by the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, with the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola SAN, as Vice Chairman. After carefully considering the submissions by investors, the Management Committee will forward the proposals through the Chairman of the Committee to the President, who is empowered pursuant to the Executive Order 007 to select eligible road projects, and once approved, the eligible road projects will be published in an official gazette and modalities will be agreed upon with the investors to accelerate the implementation of the projects, the verification of eligible project cost, as well as the issuance of tax credit certificates to the investors, since the Executive Order as signed by the President has full legal effects described as a rule of order issued by the President and having the force of law. As a beneficiary of the Executive Order 007, the Chairman Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, was said to have applauded the initiative, stating that his firm has already flagged off the construction of the Apapa-Oshodi Road as part of the initiative, noting that the President has taken a bold step to change the public-private partnership narratives in Nigeria, as government is expected to free revenue for all the public projects expenditures, while appealing for the immediate gazetting of the program to expedite action to commence the construction of the affected roads. Do other meaningful Nigerians share this view? Do they also agree with the numerous issues so raised in line with the provisions, procedures, and essence of the powers of the President to so invoke Executive Order 007? Is there in any way a breach and a violation of the Constitution by virtue of the action of Mr. President to invoke the Executive Order 007? According to Mrs. Morenike Tejuade Babintin Ashai, the founder and president of the International Center for Tax Research and Development, while the idea of the president joining hands with the private sector for road development is seen as laudable and a welcome approach, the idea, however, behind the Executive Order 007 to use tax revenue to fund infrastructure is, in the perception of the International Center for Tax Research and Development, a new dimension which requires a critical look, raising questions of concern, begging for answers with regards to how much of infrastructure development and refurbishment cost is included in the 2019 budget. How much of the expected tax revenue for 2019 will be used to pay back participants or beneficiaries in 2019? How much is the tax that the president ordered to exempt or waived in 2019 concerning infrastructure development and refurbishment, and is that reported in the budget? How much is the estimated amount of road infrastructure tax credit that will be issued in 2019, and is that reported in the budget? Is the National Assembly aware and has it approved the 794-kilometer roads proposed by the executive? Or how much of the 794-kilometer roads have been included in the 2019 budget? Is the National Assembly aware that tax revenue will be used to fund road infrastructure, and has it approved the method of funding? How much has the executive included in the 2019 as road infrastructure tax credit? Has the National Assembly approved the benchmark as standard rate for the construction of these roads, and are these rates acceptable to the participants of the scheme? Is the National Assembly aware that the executive will pay participants 16% interest rate, 14% central bank monetary rates, plus an increase of 2%? In accordance with Section 23 subsection 2 of the Companies Income Tax Act, the President may exempt by order any company or class of companies from all or any of the provisions of this Act, or from all tax or any profits of any company or class of companies from any source on any ground which appears to it sufficient. According to her point of view, the President, in signing the Executive Order 007, relied on Section 23 subsection 2 of the Companies Income Tax Act, and ordered that the approved project cost plus the interest accrued should be the basis of issuing the participants with a road infrastructure tax credit certificate, which the participants can use to offset its company's income tax liability. Can this be said to be right? Certainly not, she thinks. In her understanding, the using an agency of government to pay the participants through tax revenue is what should be transferred to the consolidated fund of the Federation, raising questions and the thinking whether one is compelled to ask why the executive is not using the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund or the National Infrastructure Fund to achieve the laudable goal. In other words, why can't the participants pay their investments into this fund and payment for work done paid through the fund? Using the tax revenue to pay participants as tax credits, which are allowed to be deducted from the company's income tax or the government of the Federation, is certainly a violation of the Constitution and the Companies Income Tax Act, noting that there is nothing in Section 23 subsection 2 that permits the President to order that companies' income tax payable by companies should be used to offset their investment in road infrastructure and refurbishment costs, in which case the only order that the President has the right to make, and which he did, is that the single uplift of 16% interest rate on the project cost should not be treated as a taxable income in the hands of the participants or beneficiaries. In the views of Mrs. Morenike Tejuade Babintin Ashai, the founder and president of the International Center for Tax Research and Development, the road infrastructure and refurbishment scheme should be tabled before the National Assembly for approval. That an executive order may be cancelled by another president when Section 23 of CETA gives room for amendment and participants may be thrown into financial misfortune. A scheme of this nature must guarantee the participants or beneficiaries payback of investments. The way the scheme is planned, the federal government may not have enough tax revenue as time goes on to pay for the scheme. In the likelihood that the government might not be able to control activities of companies in their normal businesses, and they can decide to make losses, and tax credits can be carried forward beyond 10 years. Since the Constitution demands that tax revenue must be transferred to the Revenue Consolidated Account, it will be a violation of the Constitution for Federal Inland Revenue Service to allow companies' income tax to be used to fund the scheme. This may distort the revenue generation system. The federal government must ascertain over the period of 10 years that the scheme will operate the costs that will go into the annual national budget. Section 315 subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution only gives power to the President to bring in line with the 1999 Constitution all existing laws, that is, decrees turned into laws, not to make new laws. Lawmaking is the business of the National Assembly. With the divergent views and controversies still trailing the signing of the Executive Order 007 by Mr. President, especially from the perspective of the Executive Order as a violation of the Constitution, a way out of the situation by extension, a preferred solution, according to Mrs. Morenike Tejuadi Babintin Ashai, the founder and president, International Center for Tax Research and Development, submits that the Executive Order 007 should be modified, that road infrastructure is the business of the government of the Federation and not the federal government, noting that the President needs to get the permission of the state governors to release their share of companies' income tax to pay participants or beneficiaries of the road infrastructure and refurbishment scheme. State governments must confirm work done in their states before their share of companies' income tax is released to any participants. That local government share of companies' income tax should remain intact and must be paid to them because there is no federal roads passing through their communities. That the federal government and state governments must state in their budgets the amount of tax credit that will be accommodated each year and list out the roads that are qualified and to whom contracts have been awarded and the amount of the cost of the road. The international rate for constructing road projects should be used as benchmark, and any participant who cannot accept the benchmark should withdraw. That the federal and state governments must defend the road infrastructure and refurbishment scheme before the National Assembly and State House of Assembly, respectively, as governments are not permitted by the Constitution to act outside the budget. That there is no need for road infrastructure and refurbishment scheme committee. The National Sovereign Investment Fund Act has provided for the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund to invest in domestic infrastructure. Therefore, the agency in charge of Sovereign Investment Fund should be saddled with the responsibility to accept participants' funds for constructing roads and the reciprocal payment from the government of the Federation to pay participants or beneficiaries as and when due. It is not compulsory that the companies who are participants in the scheme must construct the roads, especially when they are not in the business of road construction. The government of the Federation consists of the federal government, state government, and local governments. The National Assembly authority over the exclusive legislative list is for the benefit of the government of the Federation and not the federal government alone. That it is a great misconception by those who favor the federal government with this authority, and it has affected with negative impact the attitude of the federal government in its implementation of the Constitution. That the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission must allocate the percentage of the company's income tax revenue that can be used for road infrastructure tax credit scheme on an annual basis, and this must be what the government of the Federation, federal and state can work on in their 2019 and subsequent years' budgets. This is to avoid the people being deprived of funds needed for social amenities in education, health, environment, amongst others. That 16% interest rate be paid to participants over and above the cost of construction is too high, and the amount that taxpayers can bear must be decided by the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. That the National Assembly must ensure that the funds to be provided by the participants are truly the money from their trade and not loans from banks or economic development funds for SMEs, which can deprive SMEs of their development funding. Being aware that banks may use these funds to finance the road infrastructure scheme, this may give participants free money in terms of interest to the disadvantage of the citizens of Nigeria. Since companies' income tax revenue will be used to pay for the road infrastructure, participants can be encouraged to take infrastructure development loans, which interest rates may not be more than 5% or at most 7%, and the government of the Federation provides the necessary guarantee. that the government of the Federation must assure Nigerians that the road infrastructure and refurbishment scheme will be efficiently implemented so as not to replicate the petroleum subsidy initiative where the government lost trillions of naira and it's still losing. The Federal Inland Revenue Service is an agency for the administration of tax laws and should not be saddled with the road infrastructure tax credit scheme. The fact that the agency is part of the committee determining the acceptable cost of the scheme may undermine its efficiency in performing its duties as to ensure that companies' income tax liability to government is not compromised. If it is compromised, then this is a clear route to corruption in tax administration. A situation where the project cost plus interest rate will be weighed side by side with companies' income tax liability in issuing the tax credit may give room to bribery and corruption.
No love is all we need.
I will just beg Nigerians that, and I will also like our legislators for crying loud. They can't be collecting big money and not doing work. What is wrong for them? Because they should have the power to override any executive order if it is not in the public interest.
You want to react to that, gentlemen?
I agree totally with what Mrs.
Ashai
has just said. And also, I think even at the level of engagement as civil society practitioners, we can also take this matter to court, because the court becomes the final arbiter in this issue where constitutional provisions, are infringed upon.
Mr. Lorimiko, you have something to say.
In fact, the beauty about it is this: the democracy we're operating talks about taxation and representation.
Taxation
and representation.
We
so
have
if
a
I'm
taxation
paying my
specialty.
tax, you must give me adequate governance. Otherwise, I withhold my tax. And that is the next level we should be going. We should ask questions. The way they are taxing us, we should be more interested to know how public funds are spent. Otherwise, they can buy 25 aircrafts and it will never lift this.
Yeah, even more importantly, just a follow-up. This decree now, well, maybe I should call it a decree, but executive order. This executive order that is giving companies, certain companies, the authority to get involved with road construction. First of all, is that road construction part of what they were allowed by Corporate Affairs Commission?
Busybody.
That would be ultra vires. If they have to be doing what they were not legally approved to do. Yeah. These organizations are trading organizations.
Yes.
And they trade in so many things.
Yes.
So if they are now going to do road construction, are they now going to form another company? Because this kind of thing would have been left for our the engineering profession, the construction industry. They should have been the one to come into this, not Lafarge, not Dangote.
I think the essence of this, it's not that those companies themselves should undertake the construction or refurbishment, but for them to finance it.
Finance it is about financing.
You see, because that is what I'm saying. There's more to it. We have financial reporting. Okay. You see, the fact you can take a balance sheet, a financial statement of any organization. An organization can be big, but deep in debt. Yes. That doesn't mean they have the resources.
Yes. Also, I'm looking at, based on your, based on our discussion, I'm looking at a situation whereby that executive order 6 or 7 could be modified in such a way that government could, take local loans instead of, telling companies that are registered for something.
There are so many ways that government can raise funds for infrastructure. Honestly, if you think deeply about this, it's like draining the resources of Nigeria.
Does the Constitution provide for executive orders
because they are going to give them, interest. They are going to top it up with 2%
Yes,
of what central bank is giving. They are also saying that they can use this certificate that they get.
They can
negotiate it on stock
stock
exchange.
exchange.
They can also accept it as asset in their
It's all there.
books. So when you
So
do
that is more of the details behind the scenes that is...
we don't have the foundation for that. There must be financial reporting standard. If they have to, that must be ready. Then our capital gains tax must be modified. Because if you trade in that certificate and you make profit, you should definitely pay tax. You know, you should. Yeah, but then it has to be included in the Tax Act. It has to be included in the Capital Gains Tax Act because it's not there as of now.
I think going forward, I think based on this discovery, because these are novel discoveries, that we have done.
Like you said, we don't have the foundation.
Yes, maybe we need to call a stakeholders, because these are responsibility that the legislature should do.
They should do it.
Look, okay, this executive order that the executive is coming up with, executive order, maybe whatever number.
But I'm asking a question.
Does
the Constitution provide for the use of executive order?
No.
But you see, when we were talking about it, I said executive orders, my understanding of it is simply that as an employer of labor, I can give directives to my staffers that this is the way I want things done.
Exactly.
That is my own understanding.
That is my belief too.
No, the executive orders are rules made by the executive
for the performance of their job, not for them to go outside it.
They must not go outside the Constitution.
They must. That is the way. But the way they are doing now, they are going outside.
Yes, and that is what we need to point out.
They have actually. The way it is done now, this Executive Order 7 has clearly violated the Companies Income Tax Act,
the Security Exchange Act,
the Capital Gains Tax Act, all of those things. This one,
they need to go back to the drawing board.
The other thing is that even Executive Order 6, the executive has legislated in court. Taking monies away without the approval of the National Assembly, which is clearly
something that actually worries me about this Executive 7. The companies that have agreed at the moment to participate are companies that they can increase the price of their products by 50 kobo, and they will get money to finance this thing. Nigerians will be paying for this road construction, and they will be getting tax credits at the same time, So it's like double tragedy for Nigerians.
To buttress what you have said, I grew up to know de facto bread. I grew up to know Oni and Sons. But today, they have been swallowed. That we now buy Value bread, Leventis bread, multinationals.
Don't mention brands.
At the same time, I have seen many multinationals involved in provision of table waters. It's painful that our own generation that started well is going through this. I grew up to know stores.
All right, we got signals that we need to wrap it up at this point today on the issue of constitutional provision violation. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take through the others because we wanted to look at corruption and other issues as it concerns INEC. But I think from what we've been able to talk about today, in view of the time that we have, we'll be taking a look at this again at another episode of this program. But then to quickly wrap it up now, because we must go, I want to just ask her, Mrs. Babin Chinasai, what will be your own advice and submission at this point now?
For me, I am not very happy with the way democracy is being run in this country. First of all, when we talk about violation of the Constitution says that National Assembly shall make laws for the Federation, not for the federal government. But the belief of everybody is that National Assembly is for the federal government, which is wrong.
Okay, with that, take your point.
So that we need to, that's violation, because
Okay.
what is happening is that the president is doing things that
We must-
the president, the governors, the local government chairmen should come together to do,
Okay.
or the council of states. So the legislators should need to checkmate the executive.
All right,
It's
man, let's
important.
just make your point there.
Yes.
Quickly, Tumai, we must go now.
Yeah, I just believe that the executive is clearly violating the constitution, as we have identified, and we have to put it right. It cannot continue like that. I throw the challenge to the civil societies to do something about it.
Your submissions, quickly.
My submission is that as citizens, we have a responsibility to ensure that we monitor all agencies of government to ensure that they keep to the constitutional provisions.
Mr. Lurumikon, finally.
I want to say we've been sleeping for too long, and those in power consistently have been changing us. We need to wake up.
All right, for this purpose, we want to say a big thank you to my discussants here today. We are not done yet. As you can see, the heated argument, as it were. But then because of time and we are running out of it, we must take another leave at this point. We assure you definitely that we'll come back again to look at this other issues of corruption and INEC as it is. We thank you for today. We'll be right back again.
No love is all we
Thank you for joining us. The Constitution is an interactive TV program organized by the International Center for Tax Research and Development. It highlights issues in the social, economic, and political spheres of our life as it relates to the Constitution and its provisions. During this particular episode, we shall be reviewing earlier episodes where we have, raised topics, analyzed issues, and made recommendations on how to better our social life, our political life, and our economic life in tandem with a constitution that actually takes cognizance of the emerging realities of the African and the Nigerian society. Please feel free to make your own observations and comments and thoughts about this, social life and political life and economic life as affected by the provisions of the Constitution by reaching out to us and, dropping your comments and what's not via our YouTube channels and other platforms wherein this Constitution shall be aired.
No love is all we
Thank you for joining us. My name is Dosumu Agbola Mubarak. I shall be handling the economic segment, making summaries of earlier topics, our issues, and the recommendations we have made. To my right is Olumide Shole, shall be handling the political segment. And to my left is Adishafe Victor, who shall be handling the social unit. Without further ado, in light of the just concluded elections, let's start with you. I understand you guys made an episode on why restructuring.
Yes, we did that. And we came up with some issues. First and foremost, the first issue is that our zones are not adequately represented in our constitution. Our zones, we need to recognize our zones because they have a vital role to play in our political and economic development in our country. Another issue is Section 6, subsection 60 of the Constitution, which says we cannot sue the government in relation to Chapter 2
of the Constitution. True.
Makes the government non-accountable to us.
True.
Yet, and that is not according to the principles
It's
of
not
democracy.
ideal. It's not ideal.
The government must be accountable
To
to
the
the people.
masses.
Another of the issue is this: traditional rulers, which have been there right from the onset, and which have been playing crucial roles
Pivotal role in our politics.
in our politics, in ensuring peace and order in the society, are not recognized.
True.
We don't recognize them, not even in the Constitution. It's only when
When election
close
comes, we
to
start
election,
moving to these guys.
you will know that there's an emir in one place,
There's an Abba somewhere else.
there's an Moni in one place, that's when you start knowing. But actually, we don't
give them much accord.
we don't give them the respect that is due to them. Another thing is we don't review our constitution periodically.
Yes. So
Our constitution is meant to be reviewed
it's not up to
periodically.
date and
Yes.
emerging realities.
Yes, to imagine the realities. It's not like you said.
Speaking on that particular area of needing to review our constitution to be in line with emerging realities, I understand you guys actually had the segments where you discussed funding for education in Nigeria and how the constitution does not make provisions for funding this education.
Yeah. Our topic was funding education in Nigeria, the constitutional provisions and perspectives. Now, we are aware of Section 18 of the Constitution that stipulates that there should be free, compulsory, and universal primary education. But Constitution does not do justice, to how education should be funded. I know that was one of our number one issues. We also identified that education policies in Nigeria have been politically structured. Now, there's no sustainability.
True.
What we mean is, when a new government comes into power, policies that were run by previous government are being neglected. Exactly.
True.
So the new government takes on, new policies, and
it's all in new thing entirely.
Exactly. So we keep doing this for 4 years, every 4 years, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like
it is evident in the Ahmadiyya schools
in Goodluck Ebele Jonathan that was not continued under the Buhari's administration.
And Goodluck Jonathan, he spent about 15 billion on Ahmadiyya schools, and now we hear that they are turned into conventional schools. Now, we also made to know, we also identified that we have one of the best, education policies in the world, and at the same time, Danjuma in his paper in 2014 told us that Nigeria also has the largest number of out of school children. Now, we have the best education policies, and we also have the highest number of out of school children. That means that our policies are not well implemented. So we identified that
the reason why they are not implemented is lack of funds.
Exactly. Now, that drives us to the education tax fund, which was, when it was established, it was primarily for
all levels of education.
All levels. But by this time, it's just for the tertiary.
Yeah, now TED fund.
Exactly, now TED fund, which is I think 2% on accessible profit. Now we've identified that this TED fund is only for tertiary institutions, and it is really reflecting,
because these tertiary institutions are better off.
Exactly, the quality of education there is top notch compared to primary. It's not replicated in primary and secondary.
True.
It's really bad.
As a matter of fact, I think we have something similar in the economic segments too, because we had a segment where we discussed, economic development and entrepreneurship, and in line with what you said about zones and stuff like this, we actually explained that, the government trying to undo every part of the economy is not going to be good for the economy. Yes. Rather, we should have zonal government, quote and unquote, that will be in charge of economic issues, and the federal government would be more in line with drafting national and international policies, national security, and whatnot. And we also explained that the ideology in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which you mentioned, and which also affects education in Nigeria, should be made justiciable. Now, most importantly, we explained that there should be democratization of economic power. The business of government is not governance. That is why Jonathan was at Al-Majri school that was booming, and then Buhari came, and then it's crumbled. So the idea is we should, promote private sector in these economic areas, and this will be good for us politically and socially. And we also explained that, government policies should be geared towards developing dreams and cultivating values in the young generation. If I remember correctly, I think you guys mentioned something about 2 to 6 year old children being, primarily catered to by the local government officials.
We like we earlier said that primary education and secondary education isn't well catered for. So we were looking at charging the local government and the state government with the full responsibility
of ensuring
that proper education is let out to people, or rather children between the ages of 2 to 6, because we believe that foundation is key.
It's key.
So by the time we have such dedication at such ages, by the time they get to tertiary, there won't be much work to do by them.
True. In line with that, the Oresanya Committee, which reflected in the economic policy, says that government should reduce agencies that are siphoning money. Like, these guys are way too much. So, if, for instance, if you have the local government and the state government concerned with primary and secondary education, then the Ministry of Education concerned with all three will no longer be needed. To be redundant. So, the ministry will just focus on tertiary education, thereby leaving the remaining 2 for the local government and the state government, which should be good for us. But the question still remains: these things would only apply if we have restructuring in Nigeria. So, I hope your recommendations reflect some of these things.
Yes. The first on my recommendation is we need a zonal president. Each zones need a zonal president. You get that? And this zonal president have to be included in the government of the federation. That is, the government of the federation should include the president, the vice president, and the zonal president. You get that? On that, our traditional rulers have to be included in the constitution. They have to be regarded in the constitution. You get? This is Nigeria. Traditional rulers have a role to play. You cannot ignore them and put them in the back.
True. Even when the colonialists came around, it was the traditional
rulers.
Indirect rule.
True. They use the traditional rulers to get to us. Another thing is the National Assembly. We need one level National Assembly.
Yeah, we shouldn't have a bicameral system, especially with the way I think you guys referenced some statistics on cost of governance.
We said that we're proposing that the cost of governance should be reduced, in the country, because we've seen that I think about 6 years ago, the former governor of Central Bank, Sanusi, he told us that about 70% of government revenue was, spent on paying salaries.
Wow.
And, remaining 30% spent on 190 million Nigerians. So it doesn't make sense,
True.
to say. So we should reduce cost of governance, divert funds to sectors of the economy that are in their need of these funds. Such is the education.
Yeah, and another sector that actually needs these funds is the entrepreneurial sector, quotes and unquote. Because we keep saying that, the business of governance is governance and not business. Yes. So all monopoly government has in every area of business should be removed. And they should promote local inputs by, helping local initiatives to develop themselves, especially in light of, the involvement of our local chairmen and our local political leaders and our local social leaders. All this would ensure that there's an inclusivity within our social system such that we are able to develop ourselves by ourselves for ourselves. You guys have any other recommendations on the part? Because I still have one topic on the economic segment.
I still have another recommendation. The first one is the federal government have to give the responsibility of welfare and security of each zones to the zones. Okay. Activities that the federal government can't do well.
Yeah, they should give it to the zones.
They should give it to the zones.
I like this guy. They agree with our recommendation that the economic issues should be handled by the zones and not the federal government. It's wonderful.
And also that Section 6C.
Yeah, should really be removed.
Should be removed from the constitution.
What do you guys in the social unit think?
Well, when we started, we pointed out that the constitution does not do justice to funding.
True.
So what we're proposing is that there should be a clear direction in the constitution as to educational objectives rather.
How they'll be funded.
And how it should be funded. By the time we have stipulations on how education should be funded in the constitutions, things will go right. We're also proposing that the federal government should make use of available data for proper planning and implementation. Now we've said earlier how that we have the largest number of out-of-school children.
True.
So the government saying this, we should create policies, establish policies that would help us curb such statistics. Now we're proposing education vouchers. What are these? Education vouchers gives children or students, as the case may be, the opportunity to choose an institution of their choice with funding coming from the federal government. So by the time we have vouchers, we have policies like this in place, we're able to reduce the number of out-of-school children. So Nigeria won't be the largest
out-of-school children.
So
right now.
we've also said earlier that the local government and the state government should be charged with the responsibility of ensuring proper education
at the grassroots
at the grassroots level. So we're also proposing that the government comes to term with taxpayers. That is, come to the private sector.
Come clean. Let us know how it is going on.
Now, come to them. Will tell us the cost of education. Tell us how we can get involved. So we're saying, okay, government calls the private sector. You guys come around. This is the cost of education. This is the cost to train a child. Now the private sector, okay, this is what we can do. This is how we can fund exactly.
Yeah,
now, in the long run, and the government talks to them, tells them that okay, you're doing this for us. You're helping us to fund education. You're developing, education in the country. Okay, we give you guys tax cuts.
Yeah, some incentives.
Exactly. We reduce the tax, your tax liabilities, and a number of stuff like that.
True.
So it helps education, go in the long run.
Yeah, and the thing is see, like Shegalink says and Reno, because those are my Twitter fans. Like I really like these guys. They explain that it's not enough to just be educated. If you're educated and you are not employed, you are not gainfully employed, it's really you've not done enough. And if you have a political restructuring that does not address the issue of unemployment in Nigeria, we've still not done enough.
Yes.
So for this reason, the economic units add another topic where we discuss, employment generation and entrepreneurship, access to natural resources. And we explained that unemployment is a big issue in Nigeria. I mean, an idle hand is always a devil's workshop. And right now we have 3.1 unemployment rate in Nigeria. Therefore, we made some sort of recommendations on how to address the issue of unemployment, which are quite in line with what the social unit have said and what we hope you will also agree with us on. Yes. So after the primary education has been taken care of by proper funding and proper supervision from the state government and local governments, we're suggesting that at the tertiary level, governments should review activities that will enjoy pioneer status, carry out activities that would actually incentivize or encourage people to carry out their entrepreneurial spirit. Because instead of people finishing from their various tertiary institutions and then joining the job market, seeking employment, we can help these people become employers of labor themselves. That way we can make employment for even others rather than them just being another unemployed youth, you understand? Yes. And we also explained that there should be provisions for job opportunities for informal sector. Right now, every scheme for employment is often focused on the formal sector. And it takes two hands to clap. So if we are developing the formal sector, we should also develop the informal sector. And a very good way of doing this is the NYES scheme that we are suggesting. Instead of going for a 1 year for your NYSC where you just work in one office somewhere or one village somewhere and not really adding anything to yourself personally and to your country, we are suggesting that students should be empowered with one sort of skill or the other, one skill that they can transform into commercial benefits. You understand? And we also explained that forgive me if you don't understand Yoruba, but it simply means that you can only use what you have. So we are saying that let us keep things within ourselves. Instead of relying on foreign investors, giving tax cuts to foreign investors and whatnot, let us make use of local content. Let us look for things within our own environment that we can transform into economic and commercial goods for our own development. And we also said, of course, that we should incorporate our value systems into the school curriculum, right from the primary school to the secondary school. And this still requires, in the end, some sort of restructuring.
Yes. That's true.
So in the end, we need a coalition or we need these three arms to work in tandem. We need a social unit that addresses the matter of poor quality of employment in the primary level and secondary level. We need economical policies that would ensure that parents are not too poor or too constrained to actually sponsor their children to school and learn one vocational study or the other and develop themselves. And we need a political system that actually works for Nigerians, political system that reflects modern realities. And that is why I actually think that the idea of reviewing the constitution periodically to see if it is in tandem with realities is a very, very wonderful thing. Okay, so that concludes our session for today, and we really appreciate you joining us. We would also welcome all thoughts, recommendations and ideas on what you personally feel should be addressed in the constitution to reflect and address emerging social, political and economic issues, such that the life of every Nigerian, me, you and the government would be better and easier and of course much more productive. Again, thank you for joining us.
No love is